Is that working now?
Get the camera over here. Okay, let's begin. It's my privilege to welcome you to the University of Tennessee Nuclear Engineering Department Seminar Program. Today we have a special seminar and a special seminar speaker. It's Admiral Skip Bowman, who's the director of the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program. Skip is a native Tennessean. He's a graduate of Duke University, and he holds 2 master's degrees from MIT, one in ocean engineering and another one in nuclear engineering. He's also the advisor for both of those programs at MIT, and he serves on their advisory committee. He is on our advisory committee. Our committee just met this afternoon, and he participated in that meeting. Today, his presentation is entitled Naval Nuclear Propulsion Opportunities for Undergraduate and Graduate Students. Skip, welcome.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you, Dr. Dodds. I appreciate the opportunity to talk this afternoon about this program. What I thought I would do, though, is kind of follow this outline here and talk first generically about today's Navy, who we are, what's going on in the real world, and how 9/11 changed things a little bit, because I think it's important to do that. Then, after having that as a background, then I would like to talk a little bit about the opportunities within the nuclear program. By the way, this, although we're video casting here from the Nuclear Engineering Department at the University of Tennessee, the programs that I'm talking about are in no way, shape, form, or fashion limited to only nuclear engineering graduates. In fact, not even limited these days to engineering or technical graduates. So English majors, philosophy majors who have calculus and physics as a undergirding are certainly eligible for this program, and I would encourage you to listen to what I have to say about that. But we have 3 programs that I'll talk about that are active duty programs within the Navy Nuclear Propulsion Program, and then that last one really will address the graduate students that might be listening in, and it's another form of a DOE. It's another form of a DOE fellowship that's available, but it's a relatively new one that is specifically a naval reactors or naval nuclear propulsion fellowship opportunity. So let me talk just a little bit about our Navy today. I hope you can see that small print I see. The United States Navy has always been this country's forward presence, what we call forward presence. It's that the Navy is everywhere all the time, and that we don't need anyone's permission to be there. After 9/11, the idea that we are in an era of instability was really driven home. The good old days of the monolithic enemy, the Soviet Union, have long gone. Now we have enemies without borders, enemies without flags, enemies without centers of gravity. We don't know where the enemy is today. He's everywhere. So in this day and age of instability, the United States Navy has really, again, proven its worth. Any country's military should be there for 2 purposes. One, deterrence, and deterrence, and deterrence, and deterrence. But if deterrence fails, that military needs to have the firepower, the mobility, the sustainability to respond. And the United States Navy does that in spades. The nuclear part of this is a very important element of our ability to both deter and respond. Our Navy has gotten smaller. At the heyday of the Cold War years, during the Reagan administration, our Navy had around 600 ships. Today we're down to 315 ships, nearly half the size. In the attack submarine community, we had almost 100 submarines. We had 99 submarines. Today we have 54 attack submarines. We need 15 aircraft carriers in this country to do all the bidding, all the requirements, all the missions that the country has for our aircraft carrier battle groups. We have 12. What nuclear power does is allow us to stretch those 12 carriers to look more like 15, those 54 attack submarines to look more like the nearly 70 that we need today, and to make ends meet. Let me take you back for just a minute to September 10th, the day before. On September 10th, the United States Navy had around 50,000 sailors and Marines deployed around the world. We had 3 carrier battle groups on station doing something somewhere. We had about a third of our submarines out on station at that time. So deployed around the world the day before the tragic events of September 11th, we were positioned, as we are every day, with assets around the world. Within 11 hours of the attack on New York City and the Pentagon, we had 2 carrier battle groups off the coast of Pakistan. We had 1 nuclear attack submarine between Pakistan and those 2 carrier battle groups. The United States Navy was ready to respond if the President of the United States had decided to do so. President Bush chose not to react so quickly, but rather to gather facts, and I think that was certainly the right call. But if necessary, if needed, we were there. Not known very well is the fact that there was a United States nuclear submarine there. You might have heard the story about the USS Enterprise. The Enterprise is our oldest nuclear aircraft carrier. That USS Enterprise had just finished 5 months on station in the Persian Gulf and was on her way home by way of a visit to South Africa when 9/11 happened. The skipper of Enterprise saw the events of 9/11, saw the airplanes into the towers, knew what was going on, put his rudder over, and immediately proceeded back north, anticipating that he was going to be ordered to do that. In front of him was this U.S. nuclear submarine, keeping watch over him and also positioning to fire Tomahawk missiles if required. The nuclear Navy is today about 40% of our major combatants in this 315-ship Navy, a huge part of what we do. So we do have worldwide interest. We saw what happened on September 12th, 15th, 20th, 25th. Our country was negotiating for opportunities to land Air Force airplanes and to move our Army troops into positions with our allies, with our so-called allies. It's very difficult during these times of stress and tension to get those kind of landing rights and basing rights because countries adjacent to the fracas frequently don't want to offend their neighbors. The United States Navy doesn't have to ask permission, as I said earlier. It's really true when we talk about our aircraft carriers being 90,000 tons of sovereign territory. We go where we need to go and when we need to go there without having to ask permission because we stay in international waters to do it. So today's Navy is an anytime, anywhere Navy. It is smaller and it requires mobility and flexibility that this nuclear power program brings to it. The workhorse, as I've said a couple of times now, are these carriers. 9 of 12 of them today are nuclear powered. In another year, this time next summer, we will have commissioned the 10th nuclear powered aircraft carrier, the USS Ronald Reagan. So at that time, 10 of our 12 countries' aircraft carriers will be nuclear powered, moving to 11 and then finally to 12. So ultimately, all of our countries' aircraft carriers will be nuclear powered. All of this country's submarines are already nuclear powered. 54 attack submarines. Frankly, we need more. The case has been documented, analytically described, analytically analyzed time and again, that we need on the order of 68. We don't have 68, so we're making do with what we have. But we do have 5 additional submarines already authorized by the Congress and under construction at Electric Boat Shipbuilding in New London, Connecticut, or at Newport News Shipbuilding in Norfolk, Virginia. We have also 18 Trident submarines, strategic missile submarines. So there are 2 different kinds of submarines in our arsenal. One is around 400 feet long, that's the attack submarine, doesn't carry nuclear missiles, It has other tactical mission requirements, and then the 18 strategic Trident submarines are our country's strategic deterrents. The Trident submarines all carry the Trident nuclear missiles. Now let me go to the part that you might be interested in. There are three ways, if you're interested in becoming an active duty naval officer, to come into this program and help your country and help us continue to do what we're doing. The first way is to come in as a submarine officer or as a surface warfare officer. Here are just a few bullets on some responsibilities, obligations, as well as some benefits of coming into this program. First of all, to apply for this program, you would come interview with me after application through the Navy recruiter in the area. Those of you who are interested, we have plenty of pamphlets and handouts here that give the Navy recruiters' numbers. If you're not here, if you're watching this from a distance, 1-800 U.S. Navy? USA Navy. 1-800 USA Navy will get you in touch with the local recruiter wherever you might be. If you're in Knoxville, it'll be the Knoxville Oak Ridge area that will do that. But you can apply for this program as early as second semester sophomore year and begin receiving benefits of $30,000 a year, over $2,500 a month. So after first semester sophomore year, presuming you have met the requirement to have 1 year of calculus and 1 year of calculus-based physics with a C or better grade, you can apply for this program and begin receiving these benefits. You also receive a fairly large immediate bonus. The total signing bonus these days is $12,000. You get $10,000 of that the day you interview with me and I say yes. Pretty nice money. This comes with a 5-year active duty obligation. If you go into the submarine community, if you're interviewing for submarines, the first year would be at my nuclear power schools. And that nuclear power school is in Charleston, South Carolina. You would go first for 6 months of schoolhouse kind of training at the graduate level in nuclear engineering subjects. Then you go to an operating nuclear reactor prototype, prototypical of the plants that we have on board our submarines and aircraft carriers, and you qualify hands-on for 6 months at that prototype. You would then go to sea for the next 3 years and then come ashore for a 1 or 2 year shore duty. Your obligation is up after 5 years. You obviously have the option, the choice to continue on if you're interested in doing that. If you're interested in becoming a surface warfare officer, you would have a little bit of a different career path. You would start out going first to Newport, Rhode Island for about 6 weeks of surface warfare school, and then out to a non-nuclear surface ship to qualify and get your surface warfare pen. Then you would come back to the nuclear power school that I described earlier, and then off to the prototype that I also described. And then you would go and serve on board one of those today 9 nuclear aircraft carriers, and by the time you would get there, there will be 10. So that's the first program that is active duty in our program. The second active duty program would be to go teach at that school that I talked about in Charleston, South Carolina. This is a wonderful opportunity for those of you who might be interested or think you might be interested in teaching as a career, and you want to serve your country simultaneously and also accrue these benefits that I talked about earlier. A little bit different program. This program, as the previous seagoing program, you can apply for at the end of the sophomore year and receive up to 2.5 years of that same amount of money, $2,500 a month or $30,000 a year, teaching math, physics, chemistry, any of the engineering disciplines at nuclear power school. You must have a B or better in all your technical or math science courses. If you're close but not quite there at the B average, apply anyway, because I do grant waivers, and I'm the one who does it. 4-year active duty obligation upon commissioning as opposed to 5 with the seagoing services. So in essence, you would be in uniform for 4 years, serving the country by teaching engineering subjects to other officers coming through the school at Charleston, and the enlisted people who come through that same school in Charleston, South Carolina. Finally, the third way you can serve on active duty in this program is to interview for and work at my headquarters. My headquarters is a relatively small group. We oversee in this Navy nuclear power business 101 reactors. Now, to put that in perspective, many of you know that our country has 103 reactors in the commercial world. So I oversee and regulate in my Department of Energy hat. So I have two hats, Department of Energy, Navy. But in the Department of Energy hat, I regulate and oversee the proper operation of these plants. But we also do the research, the development, the design of these plants at two Department of Energy laboratories, one located in Schenectady, New York, one located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So my headquarters has about 300 people in it, and we get 20 of the top engineering graduates, technical science graduates from across the country each year to come into this program. Now this one, you must be within 1 year of graduation to interview for. So the benefits, the total benefits, if you weren't cagey and smart like all University of Tennessee students are, would be limited to only 1 year. Being University of Tennessee students, you've already figured out that you could perhaps interview for one of the other programs that I described back in your sophomore year, and then when you become a senior and get within 1 year of graduation, asked to be interviewed and step up to the Naval Reactors headquarters operation. There's nothing illegal, immoral, or unethical about that. I wouldn't be suggesting it to you, but it is an opportunity for you to change your mind along the way. This one, as the first program, as the Sea Duty program, has a 5-year obligation. Are there any questions from the local audience here, the live audience here, on any of these three programs that I've described so far? The active duty Navy and the three ways that you could get there. Please, sir.
How difficult is it after someone has served, say, submarine duty for their 5 years to switch to naval reactors engineer if they qualify?
It can be done. It's not frequently done. We do have along the way, remember I said that if you went submarines, you would go for a year of training and then nominally 3 years of sea duty on a submarine. So that's 4 years. You still have 1 year of obligation. We have about 5 positions at Naval Reactors in the headquarters for sea returnees, people who have been on submarines who want to come back and see what the Naval Reactors headquarters is all about. So those opportunities would be amenable to someone wanting to change over to the Naval Reactors headquarters. It would be a totally different line of work. You would never go back to sea again, and in fact you would probably transition from the active duty Navy to the reserve Navy and become a government service rating if you were to want to work in headquarters after doing that, but it's not impossible. In fact, several people have gone from teaching in Charleston, used to be Orlando, so the people who have done it were the ones that taught in Orlando, teaching at the Nuclear Power School to Naval Reactors headquarters. A number of people have done that in our headquarters. Less frequent are those that have transitioned from sea to headquarters.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Please.
I feel like a profile of someone who qualifies for the Naval Reactor, maybe what kind of, like how their GPA and stuff.
Yeah.
Repeat.
I'll repeat the question because you may not have heard it. The question was, what is a typical profile of one who qualifies for this program and becomes a Naval Reactors engineer at headquarters? Is that a correct statement? You're right in assuming that this is really the creme de la creme of the crop. So the grade point averages that we look for are typically 3.6 to 4.0 on a 4.0 scale. These are the top graduates. You see that where I said earlier Any major would work for going to sea on submarines and aircraft carriers. Here, we do restrict the headquarters engineers to having had a technical degree, either an engineering degree or physics, math, chemistry, some science degree. Again, a B or better, but the typical profile is that. I also look for a little bit more, though. I look for a little pizzazz. I look for someone who can interact with his or her peers. The responsibility of the Naval Reactors engineers is eye-watering and enormous. Within a year of being there, you are given responsibility that would be unheard of, I dare say, in the civilian community. And it's been that way. It's been part of the culture of Naval Reactors for the 52, 54 years that Naval Reactors has been there, that we do that. It's one of our strengths. It's one of the things that attracts bright people to our program, that they are given this responsibility and expected to perform. I'll let you in on a trade secret. We don't wear uniforms. The junior engineers, these junior officers at Naval Reactors headquarters, don't wear uniforms because Admiral Rickover, my predecessor a few times removed, who started this program, felt that he wanted those engineers to have that responsibility and to be able to stand toe-to-toe and slug it out passionately with people who had been there for 20 years or 30 years, and if they had to slug it out with captains in the Navy or even admirals in the Navy, and if there was always a concern that there might be a tinge of intimidation if you're standing there in your ensign clothes and the other guy has his captain's clothes on. So we do that, and I guess it's part of the facade, but it seems to work very well. Is that enough of a profile? I do look for people who can communicate. We have to have that. I'm fussy about the English language and about being able to write technical reports so that they're readable. So I look for that also. While my department heads who would interview you are looking for technical expertise, I'm looking more for the whole person when I do my final interview for this group. And it's really true for all three of these programs that I talked about. Please.
Position, like if you're interested in like R&D or something, or technical like innovative design or something, is this the place you want to be?
Yeah, it is. Don't be disappointed. A whole lot of what we do is take care of the 101 reactors that we have out there. And that requires a lot of R&D. It may not seem that way. It may seem more a maintenance kind of tasking, maintaining the status quo. Not so. Obsolescence creeps in. Moore's Law does apply to things military. We're constantly upgrading and changing the instrumentation and control systems, as an example, on these plants. My organization, very unlike most governmental organizations, has the technical expertise resident in headquarters to make the technical decisions that are recommended to us by those two Department of Energy laboratories as the design agents. I don't mean to denigrate the other governmental agencies, but we really are an educated customer to the nth. There are a couple of graduates of this program sitting in back of you who are professors here in the University of Tennessee Nuclear Engineering Department, and I'll leave it to them for a counter opinion if you'd like to check what I just said. But if you're interested in research and development, if you're interested in project management as opposed to day-to-day hands-on scientific experiments and skunk works, we do the project management, the research and development oversight. We do the programmatics. That's a Washington word that means that we worry about budgeting for and calculating how much can be spent where and how much traffic can be borne by the existing budgets. Does that all make sense? Any other questions on these three programs? Because I'm about to leave the undergraduate opportunities and go to one graduate opportunity that's relatively new. All the three things I've talked about so far are under the purview of your friendly local Navy recruiter. there's one sitting in the back waving his hands frantically. Please, do you have one more question?
If you have this program and you decide you want to go to graduate school and you're already in this program, are you able to go to graduate school? Do you go right after graduation?
Yeah, what a great question. The question is, what about graduate education, graduate degrees? A great many of our people who come into this program, especially into the Naval Reactors Headquarters program, already have their graduate degrees when they get there. Or we defer their entry into the active duty Navy for that last year and continue to pay them that same stipend that I talked about earlier while they're off at graduate school. However, many don't have that graduate education when they come to us. We are working hard with the University of Tennessee and Dr. Dodds to try to work out a distance learning graduate education with the University of Tennessee to allow you in Washington, D.C. as a member of my headquarters staff to, from Washington, complete a master's education with credit for what you did as an undergraduate, but also with credit. I didn't talk about this at all, but how many of you know Jason Cry, who was a student here last year? Jason came to our headquarters, as you know. The reason he's not with me right now is he is at the Bettis Atomic Power Laboratory receiving what amounts to, in 6 months, a master's education in nuclear engineering. In residence, design computer project at the end, recognized by the American Council on Education, the accreditation agency for graduate education, as being tacit equivalent to a master's degree. We didn't go quite that far, so that our graduates from this Bettis Atomic Power Laboratory Engineering School aren't handed a master's degree when they graduate, but with the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, something that I would love for us to be able to do here at the University of Tennessee. With our Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, for 4 courses taken after work, distance learning, in conjunction with students who are taking the same courses in Monterey, we award a master's degree in mechanical engineering to those students. So the Naval Postgraduate School gives about 18 credit hours of credit to the Bettis Atomic Power Laboratory Engineering School, and so 4 courses away, you can earn in 2 years easily, in a year and a half, frankly. You can take 2 courses at once. And many people do. You can earn your master's degree while still doing your normal job in the day hours. Now, typically, our engineers at headquarters work from 8 to 5 in the afternoon. So this course cranks up at 5 o'clock Eastern Time, which is 2 o'clock out in California. So it's perfect timing for them to have their normal courses going on. It's done by video teleconferencing, so it's not exactly the same distance learning that the University of Tennessee is offering now on the website, but it's video teleconferencing and can be done since there are only 2 locations. So the cameras are there. Our students are sitting in the classroom at our headquarters, brand new headquarters, by the way, in the Washington Navy Yard. And if you have a question, you raise your hand. The professor sees that on his monitor. He turns to you. The cameras swing your direction. You ask the question. There's an interaction right there. The students in Monterey can hear your question and obviously hear the professor's answer because he's standing in front of them, and that's the way it works. 2 weeks out of the session, the professor from Monterey comes over and teaches from Washington, and the video conference goes the other direction. So it's a great opportunity. There are several other schools who offer quite a bit of credit for this Bettis Atomic Power Laboratory training. Virginia Tech, Old Dominion University offer about the same amount of credit as the Navy Postgraduate School. But there are lots of opportunities there. People in Washington go to Catholic University, George Washington University, Georgetown for graduate education in residence if they want to do that after hours. So a lot of people on my staff are working there, both their professional engineer's license and their graduate education while they're doing this work for us. You seem interested. Bowman there, recruiters, there you go. Okay. Any other questions, please, before I go to the last? In the last, here's a quick summary of what I've just been talking about. There is the over 2,500, you can see it's $2.50 more than 2,500 a month, so I was telling the truth. And there's the breakdown. It just shows that some of the money is basic pay, some of the money is subsistence, which means food, some of the money is housing. Therefore, this number at the bottom, the total per month, is a little bit different depending upon where you are.
Button on the side.
Depending upon where you are, because that housing allowance depends upon the housing cost in the various localities. So those of you who might be watching this from Boston, that number for the housing...
No, that's me. There you go.
That number for the housing is a little bit larger for Boston because the cost of living in Boston is higher than it is in Knoxville, Tennessee. But nominally, it's a number like that. Now, here's a crazy thing, but a true thing. There's an asterisk over here indicating that you can get $337 more a month if you, believe it or not, bring in a friend. So if you can go out to the, well, never mind. If you can bring in a friend to the Navy recruiter, you get that much more, and you're actually a Chief Petty Officer pay grade while you continue going to school. By the way, all three of these programs I'm talking about, you have absolutely no military responsibilities while you're going to school. You don't even have a uniform issued to you. All you have to do, keep your grades up. If the grades fall below the entry criterion, then we have to have a conversation. Keep yourself physically fit and morally straight, and the other Boy Scout things that you know and love. And that's really the only obligation while you're in school. No meetings, no drills, no marching, no uniforms, no nothing. In addition, I did not mention these other benefits. Probably unlikely, but because you're young, but if something should happen, you're covered by full medical and dental benefits, so absolutely no money out of your pocket to go receive this kind of coverage. You're covered for $250,000 of life insurance while you're going to school. If you have a military commissary grocery store or military PX base exchange anywhere around, you're entitled to use those facilities, and you'll find that they're a lot cheaper than going to the friendly grocery stores. And oh, by the way, while you're continuing in school, for as much as a year and a half, 2 years, you're accruing longevity on the pay scale, so that when you leave your university and go to officer candidate school and are commissioned and ensign in the Navy, you start off with those years as though you served on active duty for those years, so your monthly salary in the Navy is substantially more than the monthly salary of a Naval ROTC student who graduates and commissions, or a Naval Academy student who graduates and commissions. So that's a couple of other, oh, by the way, benefits that I hadn't mentioned before. All right, finally, this is the one for graduate students, and it's another version of a Department of Energy fellowship program. You can read the requirements as well as the benefits. What this program does is it pays full tuition, all fees, for a period of up to 2 years for a master's and all the way up to 4 years for a doctorate. In addition, $1,700 a month stipend, an additional $500 a month, so $2,200 a month during the 3 months that your only obligation is to go back to either the Bettis Atomic Power Laboratory in Pittsburgh or the Knowles Atomic Power Laboratory in Schenectady for summer months, work a practicum in the area of research that you're working at those laboratories, and then back to school. So that's it, and at the end of that time, having received your master's degree, your PhD, there is zero obligation to do anything. No obligation whatsoever. questions on this one? Are there any graduate students here? Please.
I manage the program.
He manages the program for you.
Good, thank you. Larry?
Question I had I had two questions about this program, because Wes and I were just talking, we hadn't seen anything of this up until today. The summer practicum, it wasn't clear, are they doing that every summer, or just one of the summers, or?
You got it. Every summer.
Every summer. And so are you looking for their PhD dissertation, for example, to come from that particular work?
It would.
How does that work? 'Cause
It would be better. I think that would be the wise way to go about it. It's probably achievable without it necessarily being that way, but I think that makes most sense.
I think I heard you correctly for my answer to the second question, which was sometimes, even if you're planning on 4 years for a PhD, it takes a while to write it, it drags. But since there's no obligation after this, it just means the payment stops at the end of 4 years.
Yeah, I suppose that would be it. I think that where I said about moral obligation before, I think that entering into this contract, there's more than a gentleman's handshake that there is a moral obligation to pursue and finish. That said, since there's not an obligation at the end, there it is.
I was just thinking about if there was an obligation then.
Yeah. We frankly, I'll just tell you, in-house and out-of-house, since this is worldwide, I guess, we debated a long time about the pros and cons of attaching an obligation to this. It seems not to be a very good business-like decision to offer this kind of money, this kind of opportunity without some ensnaring obligation. Very honestly, I was convinced when I saw the competition. The competition is there that does the similar kinds of things, and so if we want good people, which we do, we just could not afford to stay in competition with required obligation. Yes, sir.
I'd like one other comment on that, too. The summer practicum, a lot of times when the students get into it, then they find out that they might like doing it.
Yeah.
So that's a plus, because when I was at NASA, for example, we had fellowships that we give out with no obligation. And the students compete for them, and they go somewhere for a couple of weeks, they work on a NASA project or whatever, for a dissertation, and a lot of them want to work for NASA when they're finished.
Yeah, there is some method in our madness, and it's that.
I think it's positive. The summer practicum.
Exactly. We would like to believe that people would get hooked by the excitement of what we do on a day-to-day basis and find a niche in the laboratory system. Now, this is purely civilian. By the way, these two Department of Energy laboratories are not even government operated. They're government owned, but contractor operated. The one in Schenectady is operated by Lockheed Martin. The one in Pittsburgh is operated by Bechtel Engineering. So it's not even a government. You would be an employee of one of those two engineering concerns. Please.
How should I tell you about U.S. citizenship for working in the labs after somebody finishing PhD?
Yes, it's a hard and fast requirement that these be U.S. citizens, and it's because of the work that's done at my laboratories, at these two DOE laboratories that work for me. There is nowhere you can go without being exposed to atomic energy restricted data, I should say restricted data covered by the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, which precludes exposure to foreign nationals. So it is right that is a hard and fast rule that you must be a citizen. Unlike, I might say, the other DOE laboratories that have areas inside the compound that are not restricted to U.S. citizens and does have free access. We, for instance, have no meetings there. We have no peer review of papers there because everything we do at these laboratories is classified and much of it has restricted data covered by the Atomic Energy Act of 1954. Yes?
How old is the program and how many people are in the program right now? Can you give us an idea of the size?
Yeah, it's about a year old.
Okay, brand new.
Brand new. Not this part, not the naval reactors part.
Oh, five individuals.
Oh, 5 people.
Five
Right.
freshmen?
I thought you were saying 5 years. And about 5 people in it. I didn't know that. Good, thank you. It's really brand new. Bedison Capital, as other technical laboratories, other technical programs needed a boost. And if we can encourage especially people in the right disciplines, the disciplines that we worry about, to get interested in the design of these warships, that's what it's about. But it is fresh, hot off the press. This is the first time I've talked about it in a public forum. Yes, sir.
There is one additional piece of information. All of the Navy fellows will have mentors appointed from each, either from CAP or from METIS. And we hope that those individuals as mentors will also be appointed to the graduate committees of each of the fellows.
Everyone hear that?
So that's in the
Right, thank you. Yes?
Is there a set number of people that can be in this program that you take for a year or something?
In this program?
This program.
6 a year is our goal.
Yes, I knew that. 6 a year. See how new this is? 6 a year. I suspect that the competition is going to get pretty tough for this. I have sent this out to a couple of other schools, and I got a flood of responses, how, who, where. If I'm not mistaken, well, there are brochures down here that describe who to contact and how to get it done. It's run, believe it or not, out of South Carolina. Isn't that true? Here you go. Miss Nancy Carter, C-A-R-D-E-R, and let me just give you a phone number. It's she's with the Medical University of South Carolina. That's his secretary. That's your secretary. Thank you for being here. I didn't know that.
Actually lived here.
The telephone number is 843-792-1469. Email is cardern@musc, Medical University of South Carolina.edu. And I ain't much deeper on that program than what one slide deep. Any other questions whatsoever on anything I talked about today?
I have a question.
Please.
A little bit off the subject. Why don't we have any nuclear-powered surface ships, southern carriers? What happened to the cruisers?
The question is, why don't we have nuclear-powered surface ships? And what happened to the 8 that we did have at one time? Very good question. We don't have any because we chose to decommission the 8 that we had, and the program was terminated years and years ago. Now, why? That doesn't answer why. There was a sense that those nuclear-powered surface ships were going to be more expensive in the life cycle cost than a conventional surface ship. I'm not sure that case can be made today. At the time, in the oil-rich world that we lived in, and the fossil fuel-rich world that we lived in, I suppose you could make a case for that. Also at the time, the United States Navy, if you go back to slide number 2 here, the United States Navy wasn't dashing to and fro as much as we are today. So we weren't burning up that energy at quite the rate that we are today. It's not at all unusual today for a carrier battle group to deploy to what they think is going to be a Mediterranean deployment, only to find themselves scampering through the Suez Canal and around to the Persian Gulf, or back from the Persian Gulf to the Adriatic. So we're all over everywhere. So the case was made 15 years ago that these surface nuclear ships were going to be more expensive to maintain. We had not yet developed the energy density, the core density that we have today. For information, today's submarines get one core at the beginning of life, and that reactor core lasts throughout life. No refuelings, life of the ship core. We had not achieved that breakthrough, and it was a breakthrough in a whole lot of disciplines, frankly, that allowed us to do that. Materials, obviously, but codes. Just being able to quantify the goings-on inside the reactor leaps and bounds over the past several years. So the decision was made 15 years ago that these were more costly on a life cycle basis and especially as we were spinning down from the Soviet Union eyeball-to-eyeball situation that we were in, we felt that we didn't need the advantage that nuclear power brought on the surface ships, that is, to go independently into the Barents, into the Soviet Union's back door, as was planned to do if the balloon had gone up back then. So we stopped modernizing the nuclear surface ships. As the incremental modernization opportunities came along, they were preferentially put on the conventional surface ships at the expense of the nuclear surface ships. And we woke up one day and found ourselves driving Model Ts against modern-day ships. And so the decision was made as they came up for refueling to, rather than spend the money for refueling, to decommission each one of them. And we haven't yet gone back to the drawing boards to argue our way through, to analyze our way through the pluses and minuses of nuclear power today, given today's situation. There are a lot of people in Washington, I will tell you, who have asked me that very question and have suggested that we should go back and do due diligence on determining the pluses and minuses of nuclear power. Please.
Two more quick questions of general interest. One is, you mentioned the salaries and so forth for the students that are in school getting into the programs, but it might be worth mentioning what the salaries are if they graduate and actually go to work.
I'm going to have to ask you.
Item number.
I'll pay someone half of that bonus if they'll stop their watch from going. Thank you. Now, would you ask the question again?
The question was, what are the salaries for the students that, once they get through the program, get commissioned, go to nuclear power school, et cetera, and actually go out into the fleet or to...
Let me turn to my friendly recruiters up there. What is ensign pay and say ensign over 2, since that's...
Pay nationwide is about $36,000 a year, sir. Going up to lieutenant junior grade is about $45,000.
But you're doing a regular...
That's base pay, housing allowance, but you need the...
But how about the 2 years longevity that they accrue while being in this program?
It's about a $300 a month pay rate.
Okay. So $40,000, and that does not include the submarine pay that you just talked about. Submarine pay these days goes as high as $480 a month as you work up in seniority. Is that true? Is that where we are today? So it's not insubstantial. And then, by the way, if you're interested in staying in the Navy after that first 5-year obligation, there are nuclear bonuses. Can you help me with those numbers again, since I wasn't...
For 2 or 3 years, it's $12,000 a year. For 3 years later, it's $19,000 a year.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, here are some numbers. Would you get out the bonus figures up there too? A lieutenant over 6 years receives right at $100,000 a year. I don't know if you can pick this up. What do I need to do? Do I stand still? Okay. So a lieutenant over 6 receives around $100,000 a year. That's an 03. A lieutenant commander over 04 over 10 is up around $115,000 a year. The bonus numbers that we were just talking about, if after 5 years you're interested in staying in the Navy, in the submarine force, or in the surface nuclear force, you can sign a 3, 4, or 5-year contract for $19,000 a year. $19,000 a year bonus. So that's in addition to the other numbers I said. If you don't want to sign a contract, you think you like it and you want to continue on doing just what you're doing, there's an annual bonus that's paid each September 30th that is today worth $12,500. So you lose $6,500 by not signing a contract that obligates for the 3, 4, or 5 years. Trying to signal me something there. But on the other hand, you're not wiring yourself in for those extra years.
Okay, my last question was women. Because obviously...
What would you like to know about women, Larry?
That was when there were no opportunities.
Remember, I'm a nuclear engineer now. I'm not qualified in all topics. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The question is, obviously, there's some limitations. I mean, women can serve in some of these
Yes.
and not in others, so.
Yeah, today, in our Navy, women are not allowed to serve on submarines. Women are eligible for all the other programs that I discussed. So, Naval Reactors Headquarters, we have many, many women working there. In fact, we have one with us, a University of Tennessee graduate in the back of the room here, Julie Atkins, is working at headquarters. The instructor jobs are certainly open to women, and we, again, have many women working there. And the surface nuclear program is open to women. And again, many, 20% the last several accession classes. No limit. There is no ceiling. But women do not serve on submarines. Any other questions? Anybody want to know about men? Do equally well with that. Well, yes, sir.
You knew Admiral Rickover personally. We've heard some really nice, good stories. Do you have any stories Rickover stories that you could share with us?
No. The question was about Rickover stories, and for the youngsters here, you probably don't know how to spell Rickover, nor do you know who he was, but he was the father of this Naval Reactors program, and some would say the father of our United States Navy submarine force today, since all our submarines are nuclear powered. He was a brilliant man. He was, as many brilliant men are, somewhat let's see how to say this, unpredictable.
Yeah.
And irascible sometimes, and even some would say mean-spirited. But he actually was a true patriot. He loved the country. Our country, if you have read or not read Blind Man's Bluff, you might want to take a look at it and see if you would agree with me that the Cold War, while not won entirely by the submarine force, certainly the submarine force had a great deal to do with winning the Cold War, and that was Admiral Rickover. There are some funny stories about Admiral Rickover. One that I will share with you. You've already picked up from what I said that I still, as Admiral Rickover did, interview each and every candidate for these programs that we just talked about. So those interested in coming into this program, along with all the Naval Academy midshipmen who are interested in becoming submariners or going on to surface ships as surface nuclear trained officers, Naval ROTC people, come to see me and go through an interview process. There is one story that says that Admiral Rickover, in one of his irascible moods one day, had a young fellow who had passed the interviews with flying colors and was an obvious yes, was an obvious successful candidate. But Rickover was toying with this guy. Now, he did this frequently. Sometimes he would ask people to sing if they indicated they could sing, or if they dared even stray off into that territory, he would bring in the secretary and have him sing to the secretary or dance. When I went in, I said nothing. I knew nothing. In fact, that was about right. I knew nothing. But this one fellow stood in front of Admiral Rickover, and Admiral Rickover said, "I like everything I see, except I don't think you have any backbone. I don't think you have the pizzazz to be a submarine officer, because we require people that aren't afraid to stand up for themselves. You're going to have to do something to really make me mad before I take you in." So the guy looked down at Admiral Rickover's desk. He had all his papers on his desk. He had this beautiful ship models on his desk. The guy reached down and raked everything off the desk into the floor, crashed his models. Rickover let him into the program. There's another story. I'm about to do a retirement ceremony this next Friday for one of the Navy captains who worked for me. This guy did quite well at the Naval Academy. In fact, when he came to interview with Admiral Rickover to come into the Naval Reactors program, into the submarine program, he was standing 130th in his class, and the Admiral made him promise that if he, Admiral Rickover, let this fellow into his program, that he would improve his class standing to at least stand in the top 100 of his class. So my friend who worked for me said that he would do that. 3 years later, he came back to the headquarters of Naval Reactors to take his engineer's exam, which is a hurdle that all of us must pass over before we continue our careers. As a part of that process, Admiral Rickover was reviewing the grades. He remembered that this fellow's last name was this and that he had made one of the promises to him, so he called for his record. They brought up his record, and Admiral Rickover read it, and here was this abysmal record, C's and D's, and stood 500 out of 1,000 in his class. So Rickover just went bananas and called this guy in and said, "Dose," now I've given away his name, "what on earth is going on here? You told me when you came through you were going to stand in the upper 100. I think you have no integrity. You have no ethics. You're not in this program anymore. Get out of here." So the guy walked out of the room, and as he was walking down the hall, the fellow that was escorting him around that worked at Naval Reactors said, "Well, gee, you should have told me that this was going to be this kind of a problem." My friend said, "If you birds had gotten my record instead of my brother's record, we'd been okay." So the rest of the story is they went down, and instead of Ted Dose, they got Fred Dose record, brought it back up to the Admiral. 20 minutes went by. The Admiral called for Fred Dose to come back into his office. So my friend pulled himself up and said, "I'm going to get a little apology here." He walked in, stood in front of him and said, "Sir, Fred Dose reporting his order." The Admiral said, "Why in the hell didn't you help your brother more?" So there are those stories. But there's one other story, and this is a better story. And this really, I think, goes to the heart of who Admiral Rickover was. First, let me put in perspective. He retired at the age of 82 in 1982. He was on active duty until he was 82 years old. For me to do that, I would retire in the year 2026, to put that in perspective. I'm probably not going to do that. But he had done an awful lot for this country at that time. He was asked to leave office by President Reagan, Secretary John Lehman at the time. His relief was named. His relief was a wonderful admiral by the name of Ken McKee. Ken McKee came over about a week ahead of time expecting to have a turnover period, an exchange of information with Admiral Rickover. Here are the problems. Here's what's in my bottom drawer that you need to know about. Here's how things work. Rickover would have none of it. Rickover refused to believe that he was going to have to leave this hallowed institution, so he wouldn't speak to his relief. On the last day, the Saturday that Rickover was to leave active service, he walked in and said, "Send that McKee fellow in." So Admiral McKee, about to be a four-star admiral, came trotting in just as Fred Dose had done years before. And Rickover looked at him and said, "McKee, Monday morning," or he said, "McKee, I'm walking out of this building at 12 o'clock today, this Saturday. On Monday morning at 8 o'clock, it will be yours. I will not offer any suggestions or any advice. I will not give any counsel unless you ask for it." And with that was the turnover. So that was Admiral Rickover. He was ready to serve again if called on, but he didn't want to interpose himself, having had the organization since 1948 on his successor, and he was out of his hair. Admiral Rickover never made a statement to the newspapers after that about how this should have been or that should have been, and I think that really speaks more to the character of Admiral Rickover. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank everybody for coming. That concludes this meeting. Thank you. Wishes, but I think we got. You were here.
Yeah, actually, you know,
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Yeah, I've worked with Dr.
How do we get the take place?
For me, it's been going on I've been working with the now finally actually have